It's strange how life can turn in an instant. One moment, you're focused on the clock, chasing deadlines, feeling invincible. The next, you're stranded on a desolate island, where time has no meaning, and the only thing keeping you sane is a ball with a face. How did I get here? It's a question I ask myself every day for 4 years, but survival doesn't leave much room for reflection, at least, not at first. My name is Chuck Nolan, and I used to work as a systems analyst executive for FedEx. My life revolved around schedules, deadlines, and ensuring that packages were delivered on time. That was my job, and I took it seriously. Traveling around the world was part of the routine, and just before everything changed, I was in Russia optimizing productivity at one of our hubs. Everything in my life was governed by the clock, and in a way, I felt that if I controlled time, I could control my world. But maybe that was just an illusion. Work was always my priority. And when I saw that FedEx package being delivered to that man, something caught my eye. It seemed like a normal package, but there was something special about it. A sticker with angel wings. The man mentioned it was a gift from his wife. Though curiously, he was with another woman. The package seemed to hold more meaning than I could understand at that moment. My life was dictated by work. I used to be a systems analyst for FedEx. My job revolved around efficiency, schedules, and ensuring every package arrived on time. I traveled the world with that mission in mind. I remember clearly how that package was delivered to me by a young boy in Russia. I opened it, found a clock inside, and my mind fixated on the numbers. 87 hours, 22 minutes, and 17 seconds. That was unacceptable. In my world, every second counted, and at that moment, I felt the need to fix it. It was part of my personality, the need for control. Despite the constant pressure at work, there was something that kept me balanced, or at least I thought so. My relationship with Kelly. She was my anchor amidst the chaos that was my life. I called her from Russia, assuring her I'd be home in about 18 hours. That was a moment of peace, a promise to return to normalcy. When I arrived in Memphis and we reunited, everything seemed in order. Kelly and I were a loving couple, but there was a cloud of uncertainty hanging over us. At the family Christmas dinner, my brother joked about marriage, something we both avoided with an awkward laugh. We knew there were things we needed to address, but we always left them for later. But my job didn't allow for many laters. The toothache I had been ignoring for days reminded me I had more things to face in my life. But just when it seemed I could catch a break, my pager went off. Work again. Kelly, always understanding, asked me for one thing: to be back before New Year's Eve. I promised her I would, like so many promises one makes without thinking too much. Before I left again, Kelly gave me an old watch, a family heirloom, as a Christmas gift. I held it in my hands, feeling a strange knot in my chest. It was such a simple gesture, but so full of meaning. I had something for her too, a small box she believed contained a ring. I promised we would open it together on New Year's Eve. Little did I know what fate had in store for me. I boarded the plane bound for Malaysia, not knowing it would be the last normal flight I'd ever take. The first hours were calm, but then a storm surprised us. I remember the sound of the plane shaking, the tension in the air, the pilots losing contact with air traffic control, and then the explosion. Everything happened so fast. The chaos, the panic, the impact. The last thing I saw was one of the pilots hitting his head as he tried to get me to sit down. And then the ocean. Just darkness and the roar of water. When I woke up, I was on an emergency raft, floating in the middle of nowhere. I felt the sand beneath my feet when I finally reached a deserted island. I could barely process what had happened. All I had with me was that raft and the watch. That watch Kelly had given me. It was like a cruel reminder of what I had lost, of the life I had left behind. The first days on the island were a struggle for survival. I found a few FedEx packages that had also washed ashore. A part of me, the part that was still Chuck Nolan, picked them up as if I still had the responsibility to deliver them. But the hardest thing to face wasn't the physical survival. It was the loneliness. On that island, time stopped making sense. Everything I knew about control and organization dissolved, replaced by a primal need to keep going, to not give up. In time, I began exploring the island. I found a cave, collected coconuts to quench my thirst, and tried to build some semblance of life. But everything seemed futile. I found the body of one of the pilots, the same man who had tried to save me. I dug an improvised grave for him, giving him at least some dignity in death, though I couldn't save anyone, not even myself. Every night, at the end of an exhausting day, I would look at Kelly's watch. It was my only link to civilization, to the past. One of those nights, I saw a ship in the distance. My heart leaped. I screamed, I waved. I tried to use a flashlight, but nothing worked. It was too far, and in that moment, the weight of hopelessness hit me. But I didn't give up. I tried to build a raft with what I had, hoping to reach the ship, but the ocean had other plans. The waves were too strong, and I ended up hurting myself when my leg struck a reef. Defeated, I returned to the island in a torrential downpour, seeking shelter in the cave. The next day, I opened some of the packages I had found. One of them contained a volleyball. At that moment, it was just an object, but soon it would become something more. I also found a pair of ice skates and a dress, items that somehow became useful in my struggle to survive. But there was one package I didn't open, the one with the angel wings. I decided not to touch it. I needed anything, to give me a reason to keep going. That package became my promise, my motivation to stay alive. One of my lowest moments came when I tried to make fire. I spent hours trying, but nothing worked. Frustration overwhelmed me, and with a cut hand, I screamed in rage, throwing everything around me. That's when I saw my bloody handprint on the volleyball. Something clicked in my mind. I drew a face over that bloodstain. That simple act created an illusion, something I could hold on to, a companion, someone to talk to. I named him Wilson, and somehow, having Wilson there, even though he was just a volleyball, helped me keep my sanity. Over time, I even managed to start a fire. I remember how euphoric I felt, as if I had conquered the world. I danced around the fire, feeling a spark of hope in my chest. From that moment on, Wilson and I became inseparable companions. He was the only one I could share my thoughts with, my fears, my small victories. And although he was just a ball, the human mind is capable of finding comfort in the strangest things. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My body changed. My beard grew. My muscles hardened from the constant physical labor. And Wilson, over time, became more than just a distraction. He was my mental anchor. Without him, I'm sure I would have succumbed to madness. For years passed, for long years during which I survived with the little I had. The island had shaped me, but it couldn't erase my desire to escape. I knew I had to try again. One day, while exploring, I found a piece of plastic, which gave me an idea. I could build a raft, one that would withstand the ocean waves. I marked the time with a rudimentary calendar and decided that in April, when the tides were in my favor, I would leave. For weeks, I worked on constructing that raft, using what I had, even the cassette tapes I had found to tie the wood together. Finally, the day came. I left a message on a rock before setting sail. I boarded the raft with Wilson, and we ventured into the ocean. I fought against the waves, and for a moment, I believed I would make it. But the sea had other plans. I didn't have enough water or food, and soon a storm tore apart my raft. But the worst part, what really broke me, was losing Wilson. Wilson drifted away from the raft, and I saw him floating farther from me. I screamed his name, tried to swim toward him, but the currents were too strong. I stayed there, floating in the ocean, watching as my only friend, my companion during those 4 years of solitude, drifted away forever. I can't describe the pain I felt. It was as if I had lost a part of myself. After that, I thought everything was lost. But just when I thought there was no hope, they rescued me. But the rescue wasn't the happy ending I expected. Returning home was harder than I imagined. People had assumed I was dead. They had held a funeral in my honor. Kelly, the woman I had thought about every day on that island, had married another man. The shock of that reality was devastating. I had survived a deserted island, fought the forces of nature, lost my only companion, Wilson, but nothing had prepared me for this. Life moving on without me. The woman I had held on to for all those years. The thought of her that had kept me going in my darkest moments had married someone else. Time had moved forward for everyone except me. We saw each other one last time. Kelly was kind, tender even, but there was a weight between us now, a sense of what could have been, but would never be again. She hugged me, told me she had always loved me, and I believed her. But love wasn't enough to bridge the gap of time and experience that had separated us. I was a different man, and she had a new life. I handed her back the watch she had given me before I left. It had been a lifeline, a reminder of home, of the life I was desperate to return to. But that life no longer existed. She was shocked that I had kept it all this time, a symbol of something that had kept me alive, though now it was a reminder of everything I had lost. She showed me that she had kept my car, the one I had driven all those years ago. It was a small gesture, but it felt like holding on to a ghost. We both knew what was coming. We kissed, but it wasn't a kiss of passion or reunion. It was a farewell. We exchanged words of love, but we knew we couldn't be together. She had a family now, and I had become a stranger in my own life. Driving away from Kelly's house was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. As I drove, I reflected on everything that had happened, everything I had been through. I realized that life doesn't pause for anyone. It moves forward relentlessly. We can try to cling to the past, to what we think we've lost, but in doing so, we miss the present. At the end, there was only one thing left for me to do. I had one more package, the one with the angel wings. It was a package I had kept unopened for 4 years on that island, the one that had given me purpose, hope, a reason to stay alive. I drove to its destination and left it at the door with a note. This package saved my life. In a way, it was true. That unopened package had given me something to hold on to when I had nothing else. It represented the last thread of connection to the world I had left behind. As I left the package and turned to leave, I couldn't help but think about the strange path my life had taken. For years, I had been obsessed with control, with deadlines, with ensuring everything was on time. But stranded on that island, I had been forced to learn the one thing I could never accept, that sometimes you have no control. Sometimes the only thing you can do is adapt, survive, and let go. Life had taught me a cruel but valuable lesson. We often believe we have time, that we can delay decisions, relationships, and experiences for the right moment. But time is indifferent to our plans. It moves forward no matter what. The clock doesn't stop for anyone. And while we may not have control over the circumstances we find ourselves in, we do have control over how we respond to them. Before I drove away, something caught my eye. A woman, yes, pulled up in a truck. On the back, I noticed the same angel wings that had been on the package. It felt like a strange twist of fate. She asked if I needed help, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost. As we talked briefly, I realized that maybe this wasn't the end of my journey. Maybe this was a new beginning. I had survived the unthinkable. I had lost everything I thought was important, and yet I was still standing, in a world where nothing was guaranteed. I had learned to find meaning in the small things, the promise of a new day, the chance to rebuild, and the understanding that even in the darkest times, there is always hope if you're willing to look for it. Driving away that day, I didn't know where the road would take me, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I had made peace with the fact that life is unpredictable, that we can't control everything, and that sometimes we just have to trust the journey. But I wonder, what do you think? Have you ever felt like you were chasing after something, only to realize later that you'd lost sight of what really mattered? Or maybe you've had an experience where life forced you to let go of control and you had to find a way to keep moving forward. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's your take on this? Have you ever had a moment where you had to adapt, to survive in a way you didn't expect? Share your stories with me. Let's talk about it, because if there's one thing I know now, it's that we're all in this together, even when we feel the most alone.